Dating is broken. At least, that's what everybody keeps telling me. Men say dating is broken. Women say dating is broken. Gay people say dating is broken. Straight people say dating is broken. And at this point, I'm starting to wonder if there is anybody actually enjoying dating. Because apparently, everybody is miserable, yet somehow people keep doing it. It's kind of like going to DMV. Nobody has ever walked out of a DMV saying, wow, that was an amazing experience. I can't wait to do it again. And yet, eventually, we all go back. Now, before we dig too far into this, I should probably point something out. I'm a gay man. So when I talk about my personal experiences with dating, that's the world I'm coming from. And trust me, we have our own problems. But when it comes to heterosexual dating, I'm going to need some help because I have absolutely no firsthand experience with that. So for this part of the hole, I'm going to need a different shovel. But here's what's interesting. The more I started looking at what straight men complain about, what straight women complain about, what gay men complain about, and really what people in general complain about when it comes to modern dating, I started noticing something. We might be using different apps. We might be looking for different people. We might have completely different experiences, but all of us are complaining about the exact same things. Nobody communicates anymore. People disappear in the middle of a conversation. Everybody has unrealistic expectations. Nobody wants to commit. Everybody is looking for something better, and apparently nobody knows what anybody else wants. Which is interesting because theoretically, dating should be easier today than it ever has in human history. I mean, think about it. For most of history, your dating pool was basically people who lived in your town, people you worked with, people you went to school with, people your friends knew, maybe somebody you met at a bar, or if your mother was involved, somebody's son who apparently had a very good job. That was pretty much it. Today, you can sit on your couch in your pajamas eating leftover pizza and potentially look through hundreds, maybe thousands of single people. Apparently, we now have access to more single people than at almost any point in human history. And somehow, we still can't find anybody. How did we manage that? Because when you really think about it, we solved what used to be one of the biggest problems with dating, finding single people. We built apps specifically designed to help single people find other single people. We gave people pictures, profiles, interests, preferences, locations, what they're looking for. And depending on the app, probably enough information to perform a small little background investigation. Now, before we go any further, I just want to ask one thing. Does anybody else think writing these profiles is sometimes a complete waste of time? Because I know I've worked on a profile for days, trying to get everything just right, putting little things in there. Not too much, but you don't want to write your entire autobiography, but just enough to make yourself sound interesting. You write it, you read it, you rewrite it, you change a sentence, you take something out, then you decide you liked it better before, so you put it back in. And finally, after days of work, you look at your profile and think, yes, this is me. This perfectly explains who I am, what I'm interested in, what I'm looking for. Everything someone needs to know before they decide whether they want to talk to me. And then someone sends you a message and they ask you a question that could have been answered if they had just read my profile. Why did I spend 3 days writing it? Apparently, I could have just written, "Hi, I'm Mark," and saved myself an entire damn weekend. And I know what some of you are thinking. Well, Mark, maybe your profile was too long. No, because if I made it any shorter, it would have been a driver's license. But when you really think about it, maybe there's something there because we all have this information available to us, profiles, interests, um, preferences, what somebody is looking for, what they enjoy doing, sometimes even what they don't want. And yet, sometimes we don't even bother reading it. We look at a picture, we decide we're interested, and we start asking questions. So, we took millions of people looking for relationships, put them all in one place, and gave everybody a little instruction manual explaining who they are. And apparently, nobody reads the instructions. And somehow, the results was dating is impossible. That's impressive. That's like building a grocery store, filling it completely with food, walking through every aisle, looking at everything on the shelves and saying, there's nothing to eat. So maybe the problem isn't that there aren't enough people. Maybe there are too many people. Because now there's always another profile, another swipe, another match, another possibility. And maybe, somewhere along the way, dating stopped being about finding someone and started becoming about wondering if someone better is one swipe away. Now we're starting to dig because maybe dating really is broken. Maybe the apps changed everything. Maybe social media changed what we expect from relationships. Maybe men changed. Maybe women changed. Maybe all of us changed. Or maybe dating has always been a complete mess and technology just gave us a front row seat to watch the disaster. I don't know yet. We've only scratched the surface. And believe me, I've got a few dating stories of my own that might help us dig a little deeper into this. So let's keep digging. Now, remember a few minutes ago when I told you that I've spent days working on a dating profile? That was an exaggeration. In fact, there was one dating app where I spent weeks working on a profile. And this wasn't one of those, upload a picture, write 3 sentences about yourself, and you're done. No, this thing had questions, a lot of questions. And I took them seriously because I figured if this app is going to use all these questions to figure out who I'm compatible with, then I need to answer them honestly. So that's exactly what I did. Question after question after question. I wasn't trying to answer the questions based on what made me look good. I was trying to figure out which answers would make me more matches. I answered them honestly because I wanted the profile to be right. So after weeks of working on this thing, the day finally came. My profile was finished. I hit whatever button that is that made the thing go live, and now it's the waiting game. A few days went by, and eventually I decided to check the app, and there it was. I had matches. Oh, this was an exciting day for me because I didn't have one match. I didn't have 2 matches. I had 20 matches. Yes, that's a 2 and a 0. 20 matches. I was thinking, well, apparently those weeks of answering questions paid off. The computer has done its thing. The algorithm has searched. It has compared our answers, and somewhere out there, 20 people and I are apparently perfect for each other. So naturally, I open the first match. And that's when my excitement turned to heartbreak. Because this person didn't live across town. They didn't live in the next city. They didn't even live in another state. No. we had the entire United States, the Atlantic Ocean, and then them all the way on the other side of their country. Apparently, the algorithm thought, Mark, we've looked around and you're gonna need a passport. Okay, maybe that was just one bad match. I've still got 19 more. So I open match number 2. Different person, different location, same basic problem. Except this time, I'm pretty sure to get there would have required a boat across another ocean. Okay, 18 more. Next one, far away. The next one, far away. The next one, apparently I should just start checking international airfare. And this was pretty much how the entire list of matches went. So now I'm sitting there thinking, wait a minute. Is this a dating app or a travel agent in disguise? Because apparently before I find love, I'm going to need a damn passport. I'm sitting there thinking, what exactly did I answer in that questionnaire? How do I feel about long walks on the beach? Apparently I should have answered, depends which ocean. Now, here's where it gets even better. I paid for this. Okay, I paid for this. Yes, I actually gave them money. So a computer could tell me that the love of my life apparently required international travel. But the service had a guarantee if you didn't find someone within 6 months, you got another 6 months free. So you can probably figure out which site it is by now. Well, after 6 months went by, and strangely enough, I had not packed up my belongings and moved halfway around the planet for my 20 perfect matches. So I called them because I wanted my additional 6 months, 6 more months of apparently worthless matches, but it was free and I was going to get that free 6 months out of them. I'm on the phone with the representative and they were very nice. They're going through everything. Their screen is telling them to go through, question after question, check this, check that, making sure I'd done everything correctly. And finally, I decided I needed to put my 2 cents in. I said, so let me understand something. There are more than 300 million people in this country, and your app is basically telling me that I'm not compatible with any of them? How is that even possible? Look, I've been told I'm unique, but I mean, come on. And there's unique, and then there's we've searched an entire country, and unfortunately, we're going to need to expand the search radius to Earth. and that's when I started wondering, maybe there's actually is something broken here. Because remember what I did? I filled out the profile, I answered the questions, I answered them honestly, I gave the app the information it asked for, I paid them, and after all that, the technology was supposed to make finding someone easier. Basically told me, have you considered Europe? And maybe my experience was unusual. Maybe somebody watching this met the love of their life through an app. And if you did, that's fantastic, seriously, because these apps absolutely do work for some people. But that's exactly why we need to keep digging, because we're living in a time when technology can potentially connect us with more people than any other generation before us, and somehow finding someone can still feel impossible. So, is dating broken? Is technology broken? Are the algorithms trying to be too perfect with compatibility, or are we asking technology to solve something that maybe can't be solved with a questionnaire and an algorithm? Because apparently, even after answering every question honestly, the computer still couldn't find anybody for me without crossing an ocean. And we're only in Act 1. we've got a lot more digging to do. Okay, so let's say the dating apps actually works. It doesn't tell you that your perfect match lives 3 countries away. You don't need a passport. You don't need a boat. And you don't need to call a travel agent just to arrange your first date. Congratulations, we've made progress. The app actually found people near you, people you're interested in, people who might actually be interested in you. Problem solved, right? Well, maybe not. Because now we might have another problem. Choices. A lot of choices. And this might be one of the strangest things about modern dating. We have more ways to meet people than probably any generation before us. Dating apps, dating websites, social media, online communities, friends of friends. And believe it or not, you can still walk up and actually talk to somebody. I checked. Apparently that's still allowed. But think about how different this is from the way people used to meet. For generations, your dating pool was mostly determined by geographics, who lived near you, who worked with you, who went to your school, who did your friends know, who went to the same places you did, who happened to be standing across the room when you went out on a Saturday night. And if you're gay, apparently the one cousin your friend has. And you know the cousin who lives in a city you've never been to, in a state you've never been to, and somehow your friend thinks you two should meet. Why? Because we're both gay. Apparently, when you come out as gay, there's some kind of switch that clicks, and suddenly you know every other gay person on the planet. Oh, you're gay? Do you know my cousin David? No. But seriously, your choices weren't unlimited. Sometimes they were very limited. You might look around your town and think, well, there's Bob. And apparently, Bob was getting a second look. There's Bob. Today, Bob has competition. Lots of competition. But now you can open an app and there's another person. Swipe. Another person. Swipe. Another person. Swipe. Another person. And theoretically, this should be great because more choices should mean a better chance of finding someone who's right for you, right? And for a lot of people, it absolutely can. This is where I think we have to look at the other side because I'm a gay man. And depending on where you live, your dating pool can be considerably smaller. If you're a gay man living in a small town, you can't necessarily walk into a local grocery store and assume half the single men in there are potential dates. Well, you can. You're probably just going to be disappointed. So for someone like that, dating apps can be incredible. Suddenly, you're able to find people you may never have met otherwise. And that's not just true for gay people. Maybe you live in a small town. Maybe you're looking for someone who shares a very specific interest. Maybe you're looking for someone with similar values. Maybe you simply don't have many opportunities to meet new people in your everyday life. Technology can open that world up. And that's a good thing. Which is why I don't think we can just say dating apps ruin dating, because for some people, dating apps gave them a dating pool they never really had before. But here's where we grab the shovel again, because there's a difference between having more choices and feeling like you have unlimited choices. And I wonder if that's where things start getting complicated, because when there's always another profile How much time do we actually give the person we're looking at? Someone seems interesting, but maybe they're a little further away than we prefer. Swipe. Someone attractive, but maybe they're a couple inches shorter than you might normally go for. Swipe. Or I guess it would be swipe. Someone has a good job, but their one hobby listed you don't particularly like. Swipe. The profile sounds great, but you get the picture number 4, and all of a sudden you're like, ew. Swipe. And just like that, a human being has become eliminated from consideration in about 3 seconds. Now, I'm not criticizing anyone for doing that because that's literally how some of these apps are designed to work. They put someone in front of you and you have to make a decision, interested or not interested. But I do wonder what happens when we start doing that over and over and over again, because there used to be something that could happen when you met someone in person. You might not immediately look at them and think, that's the person for me. Maybe you talked. Maybe they made you laugh. Maybe you discovered you had something in common. Maybe there was something about their personality you liked. Maybe the more you got to know them, the more attractive they became to you. There was time for someone to become interesting. Today, sometimes we're deciding whether someone is worth talking to before they've ever even said a single word to us. We're making that decision based on a handful of pictures, a couple of paragraphs, maybe a few questions, and apparently whether they understood good lighting. There are probably perfectly wonderful people out there whose entire dating lives has been destroyed by a bathroom selfie. And maybe that's something worth thinking about, because when we're looking at one profile, you know there's another one right behind it, and another behind that, and another behind that. So what happens when you find somebody who's pretty good? You like them. They're attractive. You have things in common. Conversation is good. But that's not perfect. Well, there's another profile. Maybe that person will be better. And if they're not, there's another one after that, and another, and another. And before long, maybe we're not looking for someone we could actually build something with. Maybe we're looking for someone who checks every single box. And here's where I think things get really interesting, because having standards isn't bad. Knowing what you want isn't bad. Having things that are important to you isn't bad. And nobody should date somebody they don't want to date simply because somebody tells them your standards are too high. That's not what I'm saying. But there is a question worth asking. When does a preference become a requirement? And when do enough requirements turn into a person who doesn't actually exist? Because maybe having more choices hasn't just changed who we can date. Maybe it's starting to change what we expect a person to be. And that's where we hit another layer. Because once we start looking for someone who checks every box, we're not just looking, or we're not just talking about dating apps anymore. Now we're talking about the perfect person. And I think we're going to need to dig into that. So let's talk about the word perfect, because somewhere between I know what I'm looking for and I'm not settling, we may have created something that doesn't actually exist. The perfect person. Now, before somebody starts typing in the comments, I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't have standards. You should have standards. There are things that absolutely should matter. How someone treats you, whether you trust them, whether they respect you, whether your values are compatible, whether you want the same basic things out of life. Those aren't unreasonable expectations, and they're going to be deal breakers, real ones. If you want children and the other person absolutely doesn't, that's probably something you need to know. If you're looking for a serious relationship and they're looking for something casual, that's probably going to be a problem. If you want monogamy and they don't, that's not something you should probably discover 6 months into the damn relationship. That's one of those things we should probably get out of the way before somebody has the keys to the house. So yes, standards matter, compatibility matter, deal breakers matter, but then we have preferences. And preferences are different. Maybe you prefer someone taller. Maybe you prefer someone with a certain body type. Maybe you like a particular hair color. Maybe you prefer someone with a certain career. You want someone who shares all of your hobbies. Maybe you want somebody who loves to travel. Maybe you don't want somebody who loves to travel. Especially after my dating app experience, I've done enough international travel just looking at my matches. But eventually, none of those preferences necessarily sounds unreasonable. The problem starts when we put all of them together. So let's build our perfect person. They need to be attractive, obviously. But not just attractive, the right kind of attractive. They need to be the right height, the right body type, the right age, the right career, the right income, the right education, the right personality, the right interests, the right political or politics, the right lifestyle, the right sense of humor, the right relationship goals. They need to like going out, but also enjoy staying home. They need to be independent, but still make plenty of time for us. They need to have a good career, but they can't work too much. They should be confident, but not arrogant. Sensitive, but not too sensitive. Funny, but they better know when to be serious. Spontaneous, but preferably with advance notice. We're building a person here, and apparently we're using the custom order form. Yes, I'd like one relationship, please. Can I get the 6-foot model, successful career, good credit, emotionally available, likes dogs, enjoys traveling, close with the family, but not too close? Oh, and can you make sure they find all of my annoying habits adorable, but apparently they're not allowed to have any annoying habits? And that's where I think this gets interesting, because we're not perfect either. I know, shocking, but we're not perfect either. I personally discovered this information years ago. Apparently, I have flaws. I was just as surprised as everybody else. But seriously, every person we meet is going to have something. Some habit that drives us crazy, some interest we don't understand, some opinion we disagree with, some personality traits that isn't exactly what we imagined, because that's what happens when you date a human being. And here's where all those choices from previous sections come back into the picture. Because before, maybe you met somebody who checked 7 out of 10 boxes and you thought, wow, we really have something here. Today, maybe we look at those same 7 boxes and think, yeah, but somebody out there might check 8. And if we find 8, maybe there's 9. And if there's a 9, well, obviously the 10 is out there somewhere. Just, keep swiping and you'll find them. And this is where I think dating apps can create an illusion. Not necessarily intentionally, but when you keep seeing new people over and over and over, it can feel like possibilities are endless. And when the possibilities feel endless, compromise can start feeling like settling. But those aren't necessarily the same thing. There's a big difference between saying this person doesn't treat me with respect and I'm not settling for that, and saying this person is wonderful, but they're 2 inches shorter than what I pictured. Those are not the same standard. And I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody which preferences they should give up. That's not my job. I'm just a guy with a mental shovel trying to figure out what's buried underneath all of this BS, I guess. But maybe there's a question each of us has to answer for ourselves. What do we actually need in another person? And what would simply be nice to have? Because those lists might not be the same. And maybe the perfect person really is out there. Maybe somebody checked every box, but there's just one tiny problem. Do you check every box on their list? Oh, there's the shovel. Because dating isn't just about finding somebody who meets our expectations. We're also asking another human being to choose us with our flaws, our weird habits, our baggage, our imperfections. And suddenly, the perfect person checklist gets a little more complicated. So maybe dating isn't broken because people have standards. Maybe standards are necessary. Maybe the problem starts when preferences become requirements, requirements become a checklist, and a checklist becomes a person who only exists in our imagination. But even if we do find somebody, even if the app works, even if they check enough boxes, eventually something has to happen. We actually have to meet them. And trust me, that's when things get really interesting. Okay, so let's say the app actually works. You find somebody, they're nearby, no passport required. They check enough of the boxes. You start talking and eventually you meet. Congratulations, you've made it to the next level. And this is where things can get interesting. Because I have a story. Now, before I tell you this story, there's something I need you to understand about how I look at dating. When I'm looking for someone as a potential dating material, there are 2 kinds of attraction I need: physical attraction and sexual attraction. For me, I need both. Not just that. That's just how I work. If one of those is missing, I already know it's probably not going to work. That doesn't mean someone else has to look at relationships the same way. I'm just telling you what works for me. So, I'm on this dating app one day, just looking around, seeing who's new, who's not, and I come across this guy's profile. First thing I noticed, pretty pictures. Hey, I'm being honest. Oh, we can dig into the meaning of life later. I saw pictures first. He looked like a fun-loving kind of guy. So then I read the profile. See? It can be done. Reading a profile can be done. And this guy had actually put some work into it. I read through everything. And it looked good. He seemed interesting. We seemed to have things in common. Nothing immediately jumped out at me and said, Mark, put the shovel down and run. So I sent him a message. We started chatting, and we chatted for a few days. The conversation was good. Everything seemed normal. And eventually he asked me out. So we met up and had our first date. And you know what? It went well. He met my attraction standards. He checked most of the other boxes. The conversation was good. I was enjoying myself. He seemed like a really nice guy, respectful and fun to be around. So To make this long story longer, a few days later, we decided to start dating, and after the first few weeks, everything was great. I enjoyed spending time with him. He seemed respectful, he seemed nice, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe we've got something here. Then, somewhere around week 4, things started to change. Not dramatically. There wasn't some giant flashing warning sign that suddenly appeared over his head. It was little things. For example, he told me his family was the most important thing in his life. Okay, nothing wrong with that. In fact, that sounds pretty good. That sounds like a good person. Except his actions didn't really seem to match what he was telling me. And I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe something happened. Maybe they had an argument recently. Maybe there were family problems I didn't know about. A family fight. Families disagree all the time. It happens. So I wasn't ready to make some giant judgment based on that. But then other things started to happen. And this is where we started having a problem, because apparently he thought he was going to have some say in who my friends were. No. Then we got into politics, and because I didn't vote the same way he did, apparently that meant I was stupid. Also, a no. And there were some other, red flags. I'm not going to bore you with every flag, because eventually you don't need another flag. You've already got the damn parade. And anyone who knows me knows something about me. I am a shoot from the hip kind of guy. I'm probably one of the straightest shooters you're ever going to meet, which is interesting phrase for a gay man, but we're going with it. I'm not going to pretend everything is fine when it isn't. I'd rather have the conversation, so I went over to his place because it was time to have the talk. And when I got there, I opened the conversation like this. So, we've been dating for about a month now. And you know that line that you should never cross? And he looked at me with this grin on his face and says, "Am I getting close?" And I said, "Look behind you." Because here's the thing. The app worked. Think about that. This time, the app actually did what it's supposed to do. It introduced me to somebody. I found him attractive. I liked his profile. We had good conversations. We met. We had a good first date. We liked each other enough to start dating. On paper, this one worked. But there's something a dating app or a dating profile can't show you, and that is time. A profile can tell you what somebody likes. It can tell you what they believe. It can tell you what they're looking for. Hell, it can tell you what they think is important to them. But it can't necessarily tell you how they treat you after 3 weeks, how they handle disagreements, whether they respect your friendships, what happens when political opinions aren't the same, whether the person they describe in their profile matches a person you're eventually going to know. And to be fair, that works both ways, because the person reading my profile doesn't really know me either yet. And they know the version of me that I managed to fit in a profile. Hopefully an honest version, but still a very incomplete one. And maybe that's another piece where modern dating gets complicated, because we can learn more about somebody before meeting them than we ever could before. But at the same time, we can start feeling like we know somebody before we actually gotten to know them. And a good profile is in a relationship. A great conversation is in a relationship. A fantastic first date is in a relationship. Those things might open the door, but eventually time has to walk through it. And time has a funny way of showing us things that weren't listed in the profile. Sometimes good things, sometimes bad things, and sometimes it shows you the line you thought somebody was getting close to is already behind them. So maybe the app isn't always the problem. Maybe sometimes the app actually does its job. It introduces two people, and then it gets out of the way and leaves the rest to us. So the app introduced us. We started talking. We liked what we see. We like what we hear. And before long, something interesting can start happening. We start, filling in the blanks. Because think about how little information we actually have when we first meet somebody. A few pictures, a profile, some messages, a couple phone calls, maybe a date or two. That's not a person, that's the trailer. And apparently, we've already bought tickets to that movie because our brains are really good at taking the information we do have and filling in everything we don't. They tell us they're close with their family. We think family orientated. Then they tell us they have a good career. We think responsible. They tell us they love traveling. We think adventurous. They say they love animals. We think compassionate. Maybe all those things are true, but maybe we're also adding a few things that aren't actually there. And I think I did some of that in the story I just told. Remember, he told me his family was the most important thing in his life. I heard that and I attached meaning to it. Then when his actions didn't seem to match what I thought that meant, I started filling in blanks again. Maybe they had arguments. Maybe something happened. Maybe they're still getting over it. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. I actually think we should sometimes. Because if one little thing happens and we're immediately screaming, red flag, we're going to need more flags than the United Nations. People have bad days. People say things badly. People make mistakes. People get nervous. And sometimes, something that looks strange at first has a perfectly reasonable explanation. But there's another side to that. At what point does giving someone the benefit of the doubt turn into making excuses for something we're already seeing? There's another line. And I don't think that line is always easy to see, especially when we're really want something to work. Because now we're invested. We've spent time talking. We've gone on dates. Maybe we've told our friends about this person. Maybe we're excited. Maybe for the first time in a while, we're thinking, hey, this could actually go somewhere. And once we start imagining where something could go, it can become a lot easier to overlook where it actually is. That's not just dating. That's human. We do it with jobs, we do it with houses, we do it with purchases, we do it with people. You ever buy something and immediately discover something wrong with it? But instead of admitting you made a bad purchase, you start defending it. No. It's supposed to make that noise. That's how you know it's working. Meanwhile, smoking is coming from the back. Dating can sometimes be like that. This is fine. They're just having a bad day. This is fine. They didn't mean it that way. This is fine. They're probably just stressed. And again, sometimes it is fine. That's what makes this difficult, because relationships require patience, they require understanding, they require forgiveness, they require acceptance. They require accepting that people you're dating isn't going to handle every situation exactly the way you would. But relationships also require boundaries. And that's where we have to dig a little deeper. Because there's a big difference between accepting someone's imperfections and accepting misbehavior that makes you miserable. Remember Act 2? We talked about the perfect person. They don't exist. So if you're waiting for someone with no flaws, you're probably going to be waiting a very long time. Possibly long enough for my international matches to finally get here. But accepting that someone isn't perfect doesn't mean accepting everything. And I think sometimes those two ideas get mixed together. We hear relationships take work, and they do. We hear we have to compromise, and you do. We hear nobody's perfect. Absolutely true. But none of those statements mean we have to stay with somebody who isn't right for you. And here's something else I've wondered about. Maybe modern dating creates a strange problem on both sides or both ends. At the beginning, we might reject people too quickly. Remember? Swipe, 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 swipe. One thing we don't like, gone. But once we finally choose somebody, sometimes we can do the exact opposite. We hang on too long because we've already invested in the idea that this might be the person. Think about how strange that is. Before the relationship starts, we might not give somebody 3 seconds. After it starts, we might give something 3 months or 3 years. We'll give 3 years of stuff that we know is not going to work. So which is the problem? Are we giving people too little of a chance, or are we sometimes giving the wrong people too many chances? Maybe a little bit of both. And unfortunately, there's no dating app filter for that. There's no little box that says, show me only people whose imperfections I can live with. Although, honestly, I would probably pay extra for that feature. Because eventually every relationship gets past the profile, past the pictures, past the first date, past everybody being on their best behavior. And eventually you meet the actual person and they meet the actual you. That's when dating stops being about finding someone who checks boxes and starts becoming something much harder. Finding out whether two imperfect people can actually build something together. And maybe that's where dating was never supposed to be easy. Okay, so we just talked about something we can do. We meet somebody, we like them, and then our brain starts filling in the blanks. A rented brain and a rented tongue. Anyways, we create a version of that person in our head before we actually gotten to know the real person. That's on us. But there's another side to this. Sometimes they fill in the blanks for us. And those blanks were not exactly filled in accurately. If you spend any amount of time dating online, there's a decent chance you know exactly what I'm talking about. You find somebody, you look through their pictures, you read their profiles, you start messaging, maybe you talk for days, maybe weeks, and eventually you decide to meet. So, you get to wherever you're meeting, you sit down, you kind of look around, you check the door, you check your phone, You're looking around again, and eventually somebody walks towards you. They're smiling, they're looking directly at you, and you're thinking, why is this person walking towards me? Then they say, Mark. And you're thinking, who the hell are you? Because the person standing in front of you isn't even close to the person you thought you were meeting. And look, I understand choosing flattering pictures. We all do that. Nobody takes 17 pictures, finds the absolute worst one, and says, that's it. That's the one. That's the one that I'm putting on Tinder. Of course, you're going to choose pictures where you look good. Good lighting, good angle, good clothes. Maybe you actually did your hair that day. If you guys were wondering what I was doing, I was trying to keep my cat from clawing on the couch here. Nothing with that. Let's see, where was I? Nothing wrong with that. But then there are the other pictures. The pictures from 12 years ago, or maybe it's a little older than 12 years. Maybe, just maybe, you start wondering if the T-Rex was still the dominant species when that picture was taken. I'm not saying the picture is old. I'm just saying there might be a few doctors and museums somewhere out there who would like to take a look at that picture. Then there's the picture that's been filtered and filtered and filtered again. And then, don't you think I let them off the hook? There are the people who have photoshopped their pictures to unearthly proportions. At some point, this stops being photo editing and it more becomes special effects. And I'm not meeting a date anymore. I think I'm meeting a CGI character. And then you show up and you're trying to match the person standing in front of you to the picture you saw online. You're looking at them, you're looking at the picture, you're looking back at them. I mean, I can kind of see it around the eyebrows, I guess. I don't know. But here's where this stops being funny, because pictures aren't the only thing people can misrepresent. We all know this. If you've been on a dating app for any length of time, you know people misrepresent age, their career, relationship status, what they're looking for, their interests, their lifestyle. Sometimes even their personalities are being misrepresented. And that's a much bigger problem, because there's nothing wrong with putting your best foot forward. That's dating. That's human. We all do that. Think about a first date. You're probably going to put a little more effort into looking good. I mean, let's just face it. Maybe wear something nice. Make sure your hair looks good. Maybe clean the car, or at least move all the garbage into the back seat. I actually know people that do that. You're presenting a good version of yourself, and that's normal. But there's a difference between presenting your best self and presenting a different self. Because if you're looking for an actual relationship, there's a pretty obvious problem pretending to be somebody you're not. Eventually, you're going to have to meet them in 3 dimensions. There is no filter following you into the damn restaurant. Okay, you're just going to have to deal with them. And if things go well, you're going to have to see this person again and again and again. Eventually, they're going to discover your actual age, your actual job, your actual personality, and your actual life. So, if you're looking for something real, start with something that isn't real. Seems like a very strange strategy. And I think this connects directly to what we just talked about in Act 3B, because There are really two things happening in modern dating. Sometimes we create a version of someone in our imagination. We take a profile, a few conversations, a couple of dates, and fill in everything we don't know. But sometimes the other person creates the imaginary version for us. And that's an important difference because one is about expectations, the other is about honesty. But both can lead to exactly the same moment. You finally meet the actual person, or you finally get to know the actual person and suddenly realize this isn't the person I thought I was dating. And maybe that's another reason dating feels so broken, because dating has always required trust. But now, sometimes we're being asked to trust someone before we ever even been in the same damn room with them. You're trusting their pictures, their profile, their messages, the stories they're telling us about themselves. And most people are probably telling the truth. Most people are probably just trying to meet somebody, the same as everybody else. But it doesn't take very many experiences where someone isn't honest before you start becoming suspicious of everyone. And maybe that's one of the things modern dating has changed. Not just how we meet people, but how much we trust the people we're meeting. Because after you've met someone or somebody whose picture is photoshopped to, again, unearthly proportions, or whose profile picture may have been taken sometime during the late Cretaceous period, suddenly you're looking at everybody else's profile thinking, okay, but what do you actually look like? And now we're not just digging into dating anymore, we're digging into something much bigger: trust.